My name is Caroline Bennett. I'm 31 years old and work as a copywriter at an advertising agency in New Haven, Connecticut. Sitting in my sunlit kitchen having breakfast with my 5-year-old son Oliver, as we do every morning, I find myself reflecting on how that day changed our family forever. We've lived in this house for 4 years. It's a colonial-style home in the quiet residential area of Whitneyville, purchased with help from my mother-in-law, Victoria. Though we call it help on the surface, perhaps it was really an investment to strengthen her control over us. I met Nathan 6 years ago at a presentation for an advertising campaign I was handling for a major cosmetics brand. He was there as a client, a promising director at a real estate development company. After the presentation, he approached me eagerly. "Your ideas are creative, but don't you think they could be more refined?" I remember him inviting me to dinner at an upscale restaurant with those words. Nathan is competent at work and well trusted by his subordinates. However, at home, he's like a different person, heavily influenced by his mother. Before we married, I thought it was just him being devoted to his mother. Now I realize that her values are deeply rooted in him. After 3 months of dating, when he proposed, I answered without hesitation. However, I never imagined that decision would create such ripples in our family. My mother-in-law Victoria owns a high-end art gallery along Chapel Street and serves on the board of the New Haven Art League. I can't forget her cold gaze when I first met her. "She's not of the same social standing as my son," she said, openly opposing our marriage. "Coming from a middle-class family, I suppose I'll always be an outsider in her eyes." Still, Nathan chose to marry me. Victoria had to accept it on the surface, but it was far from true acceptance. Even after the marriage, she frequently visits our home and interferes in every aspect of our lives. We particularly clash over child-rearing principles. Only art with investment value has worth, that's her belief. She doesn't approve of me letting Oliver draw freely. He needs proper art education, she insists, recommending weekend classes at the Yale School of Art. Of course, with the condition that she'll cover the expenses. My son Oliver is bright and creative and loves to draw. He attends senior kindergarten at Worthington Hooker School. After school, it's his daily routine to walk through East Rock Park, sketching the scenery he finds in his sketchbook. His drawings have an amazing vitality. His use of color is bold, and I secretly have high hopes for his talent. Through my work in advertising, I've learned the importance of creativity. I believe that free expression, especially in childhood, is essential for growth. That's why I always feel uncomfortable with my mother-in-law's critical attitude toward my son's drawings. Rather than letting him draw such poor pictures, you should give him proper art education. Every time I see my husband unable to counter such remarks, my heart aches. While I commute in a Toyota RAV4, Victoria arrives in a Mercedes-Benz GLE. When I shop for organic ingredients at Whole Foods Market, she says, "I know better quality stores." For 5 years, these small differences in values have accumulated. Though we maintain the appearance of a harmonious family, the reality is a delicate balance. My husband, confident at work, gradually loses his voice in front of his mother. While I'm generally mild-mannered, I won't compromise when it comes to my child. That feeling grows stronger day by day. In the sunlit kitchen, I was carefully cooking homemade pancake batter. The sweet scent of maple syrup filled the room, and while decorating with organic blueberries, I felt excitement for this special day. A breakfast made only with ingredients carefully selected from Whole Foods, this was our small luxury ritual as mother and son. Today is my birthday. Usually, Nathan would take the day off to have breakfast together, but today he left early for an important meeting with clients. Mama, close your eyes. Oliver's voice suddenly rang out from behind. When I turned around, he was standing there with his hands behind his back, wearing a proud expression. I had noticed him acting secretively for the past week. Signs of staying up late in his room, hurriedly hiding things in drawers, and the occasional sound of crayons scratching. Okay, you can open them now. When I opened my eyes, a large piece of drawing paper spread out before me. There was a family portrait painted in vibrant colors. 4 people holding hands, standing against a background of blooming garden flowers. The sky was a vivid gradient of blue and orange. The flowers were colored in red, yellow, and purple, seeming to overflow with life force from the canvas. The use of color was distinctive. A typical 5-year-old might simply line up colors, but Oliver had subtly mixed blue and yellow to create a new green, and layered red and blue to express deep purple. Most impressive were the expressions of all 4 people. Though not technically skilled, they conveyed genuine affection. At the bottom, in wobbly letters, was the message, "To Mama, I love you." You could see how carefully each letter had been written. Oliver, this is really wonderful. Tears welled up in my eyes. In my embracing arms, my son smiled happily. I drew everyone in our family for your birthday. I want to show it to Grandma and Papa too. Those words gave me a slight sense of unease. Victoria's strict values about art crossed my mind. But at that moment, I wanted to cherish this pure moment of joy. The weather forecast predicted rain in the afternoon. Perhaps I should have recognized it as a sign of what was to come. As we had breakfast together, we discussed the details of the picture. Oliver explained the names of each flower one by one. His eyes sparkled with creative joy as he explained why the sky's colors changed. 5 p.m. The sound of a Mercedes-Benz engine echoed in front of the house, followed by an Acura MDX. Victoria and Nathan had arrived home at the same time. Grandma, Papa, look at this. Oliver excitedly picked up the carefully displayed picture. I still vividly remember his expression at that moment, that innocent smile full of expectation and joy. Victoria placed her luxury brand bag in the entryway and glanced at her grandson. I caught my breath at the look of contempt in her eyes. My goodness, you're planning to show people such a poor drawing. Those words echoed through the room like poisoned arrows. Amid the scent of expensive perfume, the contemptuous expression beneath Victoria's perfect makeup cut through my heart like a knife. Her Chanel suit seemed to emphasize the distance between our daily lives. Nathan stood beside his mother with a troubled expression. This is embarrassing. We can't display something like this. At his words, Oliver's expression began to cloud. Then, Victoria's hand moved swiftly. Such garbage isn't worth looking at. She roughly grabbed the drawing paper, and her wrist moved without hesitation. The cruel sound of tearing paper echoed through the room. The torn pieces of drawing paper fell to the floor like scattered petals. Oliver stood there in shock. Tears began to well up in his large eyes, then streamed down his cheeks one by one. At first, it was quiet sobbing, which gradually turned into loud crying. I rushed out from the kitchen. My whole body was shaking with anger. The scene before me didn't seem real. Why would you crush my son's spirit like this? My voice was low and trembling, surprising even myself. Things without artistic value have no worth. Being pleased with such amateur scribbles will affect Oliver's future. There wasn't a hint of remorse in Victoria's voice. Mother is right. Oliver needs proper art education. My husband remained passive as usual, standing as if hiding behind his mother. I silently took Oliver's hand. As we climbed the stairs to the second floor, I could feel my son's shoulders trembling slightly. Victoria's voice followed us from behind. There's no need to get emotional. This is part of education too. At those words, something broke decisively within me. Outside the window, it had started raining as forecasted. The rain mercilessly beat down on the scattered pieces of drawing paper on the floor. In that moment, I made my decision. Never again would I allow my son's pure heart to be trampled. That night, I was heading to Providence, Rhode Island, where my parents live, tightly holding Oliver's small hand. With hastily packed travel bags and Oliver's precious sketchbook, that was all we took as we left the house, covered by dark clouds. The sound of rain hitting the Toyota RAV4's windshield filled our heavy silence. In the back seat, my son had fallen asleep exhausted. Traces of tears still remained on his cheeks. As I adjusted the blanket that had fallen from his shoulders, I was mulling over the day's events. When I sat in the driver's seat, I could see Victoria and Nathan through the house window. They seemed to be arguing intensely, but I didn't care anymore. I started the engine and pressed the accelerator. The house grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Doubt crossed my mind about whether this decision was right. But now, I just had to keep driving. I'm sorry, Oliver. When the car stopped at a traffic light, I whispered softly while watching my son through the rearview mirror. As a mother, I couldn't protect him from that scene. That regret squeezed my heart. My cell phone started ringing. Nathan's name appeared on the screen. However, my finger moved toward the reject button. Then, a message arrived from Victoria. Control your emotional behavior. If you're thinking of Oliver's best interests, you should return immediately. I couldn't help but smile wryly at the high-handed tone. If she was really thinking about my son's best interests, how could she have committed such a cruel act? I quietly left the message read but unanswered. We arrived at my parents' house after 9 p.m. My parents welcomed us without asking any questions, just silently. As former teachers, they seemed to understand the situation better than words could express. Caroline, I support your decision. My mother said this casually while preparing the bedroom. At those words, like a taut string being cut, tears began to flow. From the next day, I began a new life. A 2-hour commute each way from my parents' house to work. Still, I chose to continue working. I wake up at 5 a.m., give a soft kiss to the sleeping Oliver, and leave the house. While my parents look after my son, I threw myself desperately into work. I understood that financial independence was essential to overcome this situation. The house purchased with Victoria's help now felt like golden chains binding us. Eventually, I would need to find a new place with my own strength. With that in mind, I started taking on additional work. I wouldn't get home until after 8 p.m. Even with my exhausted body, I absolutely made time to spend with my son. The new daily routine became drawing together for 30 minutes before bedtime. Fortunately, my achievements at the advertising agency were recognized, and they allowed me to combine working from home with office work. Nathan called every day. Emails and text messages too. However, I cut off all contact. Occasionally, when I saw messages saying, "Please let me see Oliver," my heart ached. But I felt my son needed a quiet environment. Then, about a month after the incident, an unexpected turning point arrived. That day, a new drawing by Oliver was displayed on my desk. It was a landscape of East Rock Park that he had drawn at my parents' house. The trees in the park, depicted with unique coloring, seemed to be dancing. "This is a wonderful piece." I nearly jumped out of my chair at the sudden voice. When I turned around, there stood the renowned art critic Eleanor Price. She was scheduled to visit the office today as a consultant for a new advertising campaign. I apologize, but I was captivated by this drawing. Ms. Price continued, still gazing at the picture. "Amazing sense of color. The gradation of blue and green reminds me of Van Gogh. And this composition." I held my breath. "I also sense elements of contemporary art." Is this your child's work?" When I nodded, her eyes lit up. "At MoMA, we're planning an exhibition called Future Masters next month. We'll be displaying works by talented children under 10 from around the world. Would you allow us to exhibit this piece?" Those words struck my ears like thunder. The Museum of Modern Art, an offer from the museum considered the holy ground of contemporary art. I almost dropped the warm latte on my desk. The salad I had bought from Whole Foods during lunch break remained untouched. "Would you consider it?" Ms. Price continued gently. "The purpose of this project is to provide appropriate evaluation and opportunities to talented children at an early stage. Of course, we'll take full measures to protect privacy." A small sigh escaped my lips. This could only be described as ironic. The talent that Victoria had denied in my son was being recognized by a world-class museum. Moreover, by the museum she most valued for its investment value. The rumors spread surprisingly quickly, especially in New Haven's art circles, where it became a major topic of discussion. And inevitably, that information reached Victoria's ears. As the owner of a high-end art gallery, her reputation began to waver dramatically. The fact that she had failed to recognize her own grandson's talent raised questions about her eye for art itself. "Caroline, is this true?" Nathan called desperately that evening. His voice conveyed deep regret for not having noticed his son's talent. "I want to see Oliver. I want to apologize." However, I quietly declined that request too. There was also contact from Victoria through her secretary. Messages saying "urgent contact from Mrs. Bennett" arrived repeatedly. Apology cards, presumably bought at an expensive stationery store, arrived from the Chapel Street Gallery. But my attitude remained unchanged. Letters were delivered to my parents' mailbox every day. Apology letters from Nathan, long explanations written with an expensive fountain pen from Victoria. I packed them all into a cardboard box without checking their contents. I felt that the situation wasn't simple enough to be remedied with easy apologies for trampling on my son's heart. The smiling family in Oliver's drawing, how could we restore that pure wish? I began to think that this incident might be an opportunity to fundamentally reconsider our family's way of being. At night, watching my son's sleeping face, I had strengthened my resolve. This wasn't an issue that could be resolved with mere apologies. We needed to fundamentally change our family's values. About 2 weeks after the MoMA offer became a topic of discussion, I had made my final decision. In my parents' study, I stayed up late facing the computer, composing a long email. Outside the window, autumn insects were chirping, and the maple tree planted in my parents' garden was illuminated by moonlight. On the desk was a cup of chamomile tea, now cold. Though I had brewed it to calm my nerves, I had hardly touched it. My words flickered blue-white on the screen. In the recipient field were Victoria and Nathan's email addresses. With each cursor blink, I felt my heartbeat quicken. Upstairs, Oliver was breathing peacefully in his sleep. I told myself this was a necessary step for my son's future. Regarding this incident, mere apologies will not suffice as a solution. I would like to present the following 3 conditions as my requirements. I reviewed my words on the screen multiple times. Perhaps they were too harsh. But I believe this was a necessary process. 1 year of weekend volunteer work doing art therapy at children's homes. You will need to interact directly with the children. I want you to understand the true value of art. 2 Converting the reception room into an atelier. I demand a space where Oliver can freely engage in creative activities. A space where children can express themselves without worrying about expensive furniture and carpets. 3 Covering operational costs for local children's art classes. So that talented children don't lose opportunities due to economic reasons. After pressing the send button, a deep sigh escaped. While waiting for a response, my heart swayed with complex emotions. The reply came surprisingly quickly. A phone call from Victoria, despite the late hour. Her voice had lost its usual high-handed tone. I accept all conditions. And I would like to make an additional proposal. At those words, I found myself leaning forward. We will establish a permanent children's art program at the gallery. We'll also launch a support program for talented young artists. And I would like to arrange the best art instructor for Oliver. Her voice trembled slightly on the other end of the phone. Until now, I only saw art as valuable investment objects. But that was a big mistake. Tears welled up in my eyes at that confession. However, the path to reconciliation wasn't so simple. A few days after the incident, at the first apology scene, autumn sunlight streamed through the large windows of the luxury apartment. On the Persian carpet that Victoria favored, both of them knelt down and bowed their heads deeply. Victoria's Chanel suit was something she would never normally allow to touch the floor. Nathan's Armani suit was getting wrinkled on the floor as well. However, their expressions showed they no longer cared about such things. On the living room wall, one piece of the torn drawing still remained. I had intentionally left it there, to never forget what happened in this place. Son, Papa was wrong. Will you forgive me? Nathan's voice trembled. How many times must he have practiced those words? Grandma is truly sorry too. Please forgive me. Victoria's voice had lost its usual dignity. However, Oliver remained silent, hiding behind me. His small body trembled slightly. Do you think it's that easy to be forgiven? My voice rang out, cold as ice. For 3 months after that, they earnestly fulfilled the conditions. Victoria, going to the children's home every weekend. The children, initially hesitant, gradually warmed up to her. Her expensive suits had been replaced by an apron. Nathan rushed around managing the art classes between his work commitments. Sometimes he looked exhausted, but when drawing with the children, he seemed genuinely happy. And again, in the same living room. Over these 3 months, we've learned the true value of art. Natural tears glistened in Victoria's eyes. As a father who couldn't understand his son's talent, I offer my heartfelt apology. There was genuine weight to Nathan's words. At that moment, Oliver let go of my hand and walked toward them. I'm not angry anymore. With those words, the atmosphere in the room changed. Warm tears rolled down my cheeks. A year later, the New Haven cityscape had completely transformed. The home atelier bore no trace of its former life as a reception room. All expensive furniture and decorations had been removed, replaced by large art supply shelves covering an entire wall. Paint stains dotted the floor, creating patterns that resembled modern art. Natural light poured in abundantly through the floor-to-ceiling windows. In that light, Oliver was working on a new piece. Standing at his easel, he looked like a small artist. On the wall hung a proud photo from the MoMA exhibition. Next to it was a group photo with the children from the care home. Victoria's gallery had transformed from a space of only high-end art pieces into a vibrant art space. Local people regularly visited the monthly exhibitions of children's works. A permanent corner for young artists' works was established, and art critics sometimes visited. The change extended to our family's form as well. Sunday evening dinners invariably became large family gatherings, including my parents. Victoria's voice, excited every time she saw the children's works, echoed around the table. These days, instead of investment value, she often spoke of freedom of expression and joy of creation. Sometimes we would have heated discussions about artistry. But unlike before, these were filled with pure passion rather than being high-handed. Nathan, too, now talked more enthusiastically about the children he met in class than about work matters. Recently, Oliver completed a new family portrait. The same composition as the torn picture, but this time it was different. Behind the family of 4 were my parents. And in the background, the faces of children from the care home and friends from art class were also drawn. "This is our new family," Oliver said, showing me the picture, and I whispered in my heart. Indeed, family can take many forms. While repairing our broken relationships, we had discovered a larger, richer form of family. Outside the window, a wind announcing a new season was blowing.